Chloe, 2016 is nearly upon us, so what are your 10 predictions of how resilient communities will adopt to the changing political, economical and environmental external realities in the new year?
I think that the first risk that we're going to be seeing is that of aging infrastructure. Around the world, we have this problem where we built infrastructure maybe decades ago. Certainly it's in the news a lot in the United States, and we need to deal with that aging infrastructure problem now. The world is changing rapidly, our needs are changing rapidly, and our infrastructure needs to reflect that and be more resilient in order to deal with 21st century problems. Our second risk would be about technology. Technology is changing rapidly. Again, our systems, our habits are not necessarily where they need to be in order to deal with the coming of cloud computing, cybersecurity problems, everyone being online, billions of people being online. We're not necessarily prepared for that kind of world yet, so companies need to work on bolstering their technology, and government especially needs to work on making sure that networks can handle that kind of capacity. We see in 2016 that supply chain will continue to be a big risk. Supply chains are increasing in complexity, and that creates vulnerabilities throughout the system in our ability to deliver goods and services, not just across countries, but across the world. And then when you look at issues like the Target hack, that one came through an invoice from a trusted supplier that was easier to hack than Target was. So I think it's important that when we look at supply chain risk, we also consider that there might be malevolence within our trusted supply chain, and that we need to work with our suppliers, some of whom may be small and medium-sized businesses, to increase their level of preparedness, because that affects our ability to do business as well. That leads into the cybersecurity prediction. Of course, cybersecurity is a huge issue, not just because hacks are happening all the time and they're constantly changing and it's a big business, but also because governments are going to increasingly step in and try to establish national frameworks and national strategies for dealing with cybersecurity defense, which will also affect the ability of businesses to operate and to do business as usual. They'll have to deal with increasing regulatory burdens or regulatory requests as they relate to cybersecurity. We also see that standards and regulations could increase, could change. We have a lot of trade negotiations going on, and the ability of the government to impact sectors will continue to increase. We see this particularly in healthcare. There's a lot of demand for increased service delivery in healthcare, and governments are responding to that, especially as populations age in much of the world. We also see that businesses are under a customer mandate for higher governance standards. It's important that companies improve their ethical framework within their operation, not just because they're ceding to external pressure that they have higher governance standards, but because it's actually part of the framework of their company. Internally, they are committed to higher governance, not just committed to the bottom line, but also to improved environmental and social good goals, because otherwise you open yourself up to unnecessary risks. And as millennials age and join the workforce and join the customer base, they are certainly looking to do business. On the political side, of course, we're seeing continued austerity measures, and we're seeing the reaction to them, so that creates instability, and instability makes people afraid to go out and necessarily make large purchases, and that could continue to be a drag on the economy through 2016. On the political side also, we have increasing migration. We do not expect the migration of peoples across national borders to cease anytime soon. Political disruption is occurring. They're fleeing from war. They're fleeing economic hardship, and governments do not have a good framework in place for dealing with these large numbers of people who are suddenly at their borders. There could potentially be economic opportunities as these people are integrated into communities and start to contribute to the economy. We could see an uptick, but that would involve a responsible, organized approach by governments in terms of dealing with this problem. And last but absolutely not least is the ongoing long-term problem of a changing climate. We've seen that natural disasters have been increasing more and more, and now 80% of natural disasters since the 1980s are related to changing climate. So this problem is not going away anytime soon. We're dealing with it on the international level. There's the talks in Paris that the UN is hosting in December, but we don't necessarily anticipate that the international organizations can solve the problem on their own by creating a governmental commitment, but that everybody needs to come together to deal with this particular large risk, because it can't happen in just one place. It has to be everybody dealing with that issue and figuring out how to adapt to a changing climate and mitigate the risk.